Good morning. I too have a name that I've lived with. It's not very pronounceable, not very spellable, but I just couldn't get rid of it either. So there it is. And it's pronounced like an S, so it's Cukor, Patricia Cukor-Avila, right? Hungarian, means sugar. I'll just stop there. Okay, so when Patrick asked me to do this presentation, my first thought was, this should be really easy. I've been teaching here since 1994. I must have dozens of best teaching moments. And of course, no bad ones, because we've all chosen to forget those. Well, maybe not, because I've heard a few this morning, right? Which is great. But after mulling this around for a few days, I decided I would tell you about a teaching moment, a teaching experience I had in about a few years ago in 2011, in the fall of 2011, when I redesigned an undergraduate course that I teach every semester in the fall, and it's called English Language in America. And so this experience sort of developed along a bumpy path, so I've got a good and a bad story here, but ultimately resulted in a significant learning experience for both my students and for me. So just briefly, I forgot my glasses, so you have to bear with me here. A bad moment. Briefly, Ling 4010, which is the number of that course, goes over issues like why people from different parts of the US have accents, why certain varieties of American English are considered more prestigious than others, and what are some of the changes that have taken place in American English over the past several decades. So my typical approach to teaching this course has been to separate the course into 4 major topics and then have students do small research projects at the end of each section. So this semester I wanted to try a different approach. So I decided to engage the students in a semester-long field project where they would collect data on perceptions of Texas speech. Here we are in Texas. Basically, where people living in Texas perceive dialect boundaries in the state. Because if you've lived here long enough, or if you're from here, you know that not everybody sounds the same in the entire state, right? It's a pretty big place. And then also look at the ideologies that are associated with these boundaries that people perceive. So my vision for this project was so amazing. Students would experience firsthand how to do preliminary research on a topic, design a survey instrument, collect survey data, digitize the data using cool map-generating software, analyze the data, and synthesize their findings in a PowerPoint presentation at the end of the semester. And best of all, I had invited a good friend and fellow linguist, Dennis Preston, who pioneered this kind of research, to be a guest during their final presentation. So this was just the ultimate class. I was certain that my students would feel the same giddy excitement that I had when I broke them into groups and explained each phase of the project to them. Well, let's just say that not all of their eyes lit up with joy, but I was committed to making this work, so onward we trudged, right? They worked in groups, with each group responsible for a piece of the project. I heard the usual grunting and groaning about group work, right? But in the end, they did their part to complete their tasks. But I want to focus on one group that went above and beyond the call of duty, the group responsible for digitizing the paper survey maps and ultimately creating digital maps in ArcGIS, a program I had never used. I don't know how many of you have used it, but you're supposed to grunt when you hear that, right? Okay. Okay, this is the part of the story where I tell you about my worst teaching moment. You might be wondering why I would even attempt to have my students use ArcGIS if I had never used it myself. Well, I modeled the project after similar research done by a colleague at the University of Washington, and she had used ArcGIS to produce really cool dialect maps. So I figured I could do the same. I read the article, I saw the process in there, right? From what I read in her article, the process seemed pretty straightforward. But what I didn't know at the time was that she had worked with a geographer who did all the digitization and all the ArcGIS analysis. So here I am, the linguist who knows nothing yet. I can see that some people understand what I'm talking about here. So by the time I realized that I was in way over my head, my students had invested a lot of time and energy in the lab, so there was no going back. Fortunately, one of my MA students was working with us, and she spent hours, literally hours, learning how to navigate the program. And thanks to Bruce Hunter, who has since retired, I was able to get help from a couple of geography graduate students. We all made a lot of mistakes, and ArcGIS, as it always does, quit unexpectedly, countless times. But in the end, don't know how we did it, my students created digital maps of the perceptual data that they had collected. Each of the groups came together and produced a final product that they presented in the Environmental Sciences building, because I wanted to be where it all took place, to an invited audience that included Bruce Hunter, who had given us access to the lab at all hours of the night, and Dennis Preston, my linguist friend, who drove down from Stillwater to be our guest of honor. I was really proud of my students who had stumbled along with me on this journey. Most of them, on the other hand, were probably relieved that the semester was over and they had survived. I was certain that none of them ever wanted to work with me again, but fortunately that wasn't the case. 2 of the students asked to continue the research in an independent study class. We formed a research group. That's the cue. There should be a picture there. There we are on the left-hand side. We formed a research group with my MA student and spent the semester collecting new data, and most importantly, we learned, more or less, how to navigate through ArcGIS. That spring, we presented our research, that's the picture on the right, at a conference in Austin, and this was subsequently published, so my 2 undergrad students actually were able to be published, and had a story about the project posted on the UNT News webpage, which is that hyperlink, but it may not be working, so that's okay. And since then, we have presented other phases of the project at several national and international conferences. We have also collaborated with another geographer here at UNT, Chetan Tiwari, whose help with this project has been invaluable, and we couldn't have done it without him. So that was a great experience for me as well. I learned quite a bit that semester as I worked alongside my students. I experienced their frustration at the difficulties they encountered, and I also shared their excitement as they saw the results come together, and they had a story to tell about their data, which is, for me, this is what teaching is all about, a shared learning experience where I am the guide, and I encourage my students to think critically. But perhaps the most important lesson I learned that semester is not to bite off more than I can chew, especially when testing out a new and improved approach to teaching, and most of all, to be a much better prepared guide. Thank you.